Okay, Breath of Fresh Squidward. This is the episode that I picked as number 1 in my top 10 worst Squidward torture porns list, which understandably made a lot of people confused. I stand strong in my choice, but I could have elaborated a bit more. I mean, is Squidward really tortured more here than he was in Cephalopod Lodge, Boating Buddies, or Choir Boys? Well, maybe. It's a little more abstract than that. Let's start with the fact that this episode should be called The Two Faces of SpongeBob, because, well, let's just say that hypocrisy is probably the thing that I hate the absolute most in bad SpongeBob episodes. The main problem with this episode is that it's telling me it's okay when SpongeBob does it, and it's not when Squidward does it. Like, this is probably the most blatant way that the show can tell me that the universe hates Squidward and doesn't want him to be happy. I said that this episode is the worst Squidward torture porn if you take every other one into consideration. But yeah, I should have explained that better, since most of the list aired after this episode. The episodes that I considered for that list that aired before Breath of Fresh Squidward were Good Neighbors, The Thing, Squidward, Squidtastic Voyage, and Boat Smarts. Here's the thing, this is the first Squidward torture porn where I am absolutely sure that they're telling me that Squidward is the antagonist, and SpongeBob is the protagonist. A protagonist that starts the episode by breaking into Squidward's house every single morning. With what comes later, the episode directly tells me that SpongeBob is in the right for doing this. In Good Neighbors, that ending is just a stupid joke. Here it's a major part of the plot. Not only that, but SpongeBob knows the story of why it's wrong by heart. So Squidward is apparently a big baby for not being able to put up with this. But SpongeBob can't last one day with, essentially, his own SpongeBob. The second part of this episode, where SpongeBob is being annoyed, tells me that he was the good guy the whole time, and Squidward was in the wrong for being upset. Especially when SpongeBob shouting at Squidward at the end was meant to be justified. Instead, all it does is imply that Squidward was in the wrong for not putting up with SpongeBob and Patrick in all the aforementioned episodes. But here's what really gets me about this episode. It makes the episode infuriating on rewatch. When Squidward essentially steals SpongeBob's life from him, you find it justified, considering what happened at the beginning of the episode. SpongeBob is actually getting some consequences for being a hellish neighbor. But with the breakdown at the end, the episode is telling me that I should not find it justified. I should find it wrong and abhorrent. This guy came out of nowhere and did almost exactly what the guy you told me to root for does on a daily basis. When an episode tells you that you should feel bad for something that it made you enjoy, there's a real problem there. Let's talk about Squidward. His brain gets fried and he starts acting like SpongeBob. And it seems to be implied that that's the opposite of Squidward. They've done this joke before. If the first part of this episode rips off Good Neighbors, then the second half pretty much rips off the ending of Opposite Day. What this episode tells me is the second someone tries to initiate a torture porn on SpongeBob or give him consequences for being the catalyst of a torture porn, it's a bad thing. But it's okay whenever SpongeBob tries to do it to Squidward. And this attitude carried over to episodes like Boating Buddies and especially Choir Boys. I'm fairly sure that those episodes wanted Squidward to be the antagonist. Everything about this episode just makes me angry, and that's even disregarding the animation errors and the plot hole that Squidward's security broke down earlier so it couldn't possibly have fried him back to normal. The episode probably wasn't meant to be taken this way, but if you haven't noticed, authorial intent doesn't really mean much when it comes to the overall product. Keep in mind that the end of A Pal for Gary was intended to be funny, and there are many terrible episodes where the person that you're supposed to hate ends up being the most sympathetic character.